I know a lot of you are probably wondering exactly why it is that hard right-wing conservative evangelical Christians have such a warped and distorted view of American history. And I'm going to do a series of videos detailing exactly why that is and how that came to be. I grew up as a conservative evangelical Christian. I went to a private conservative Christian school and college. So I'm going to be reviewing a lot of the books that were used and are used in these schools and show you exactly what these people have been taught since childhood. First up is this book right here, New World History and Geography in a Christian Perspective. This is the book that I used in 7th or 8th grade, something like that. I mean, not this exact physical book, but this book. You know what I'm saying? Okay, we're going to start off with an easy one. What did they have to say about the Civil War? In chapter 14, titled Division and Reunion, in a section about abolition and slavery, it says, many Northerners who had previously ignored the issue began to side with the abolitionists. By this time, the South depended on its slaves, even though fewer than 5% of white Southerners owned slaves, and half of these had no more than 5 slaves each. If the Southerners freed their slaves, how could they make a living? And how would the freed slaves earn a living? There were no easy answers to these questions. So that excerpt is emblematic of the fine line this book tries to walk when it's teaching kids about the Civil War. And that fine line is that slavery is in fact bad, but the Confederacy, for the most part, is good. Slavery is the fault of the Democrats. It's evil. Of course, the Democrats did it. But the Confederacy itself and the Confederate generals and individual Confederates and Confederate iconography and the states' rights argument, all of that is good and should be upheld. That's the good part of the Confederacy. And they try to distance it from slavery as if the two aren't inextricably linked. Also note the immediate sympathy given to Southern slave owners. Well, these people depended upon slavery for their livelihood. If you freed the slaves, how would they make a living? Difficult question, unanswerable. Who knows? And the slaves themselves, if you freed them, how would they survive? By being paid for their labor? Really tricky questions for these folks. They also point to the misleading stat that less than 5% of Southern white people own slaves. It's 3%, I believe, the number is. And that number is misleading because it only takes into account like the person who bought the slave, the person whose name is on the receipt. So the head of the household would own the slave, but he lived there with, 15, 20, 25 of his relatives because, that's how families lived back then. They didn't have the nuclear family like we do now. And so in reality, that 30 people owned that slave, not one, but they only counted one. So the real number is like 35% of Southern white people own slaves. They also tried to say that, and a lot of them had fewer than 5 slaves because, your morality is really outstanding if you own fewer than 5 people. It's, I know, but you can see where a lot of conservative Republican talking points come from because that's what they're literally teaching in school. So that's the first part. Many more to come.